and ask so many questions that they eventually just started answering everything he asked, and then he'd call and verify with other operators at different times of the day. And if anybody gave him false information, he'd call until he got the operator that gave him fake information and say, "Well, John, you lied to me. You told me that the chair next door to you was purple, and I know in fact it's blue. Why would you lie to Bob, the operator's friend?" And, it eventually got to the point that they knew his voice so well that he'd call up and they'd say, "Hi, Bob, the operator's friend."
Well, he'd challenge them. And I have to say, first of all, that this guy was just an epic prick. He was the worst person I've ever met. He is everything that we all try to convince everybody we're not. Like, he is actually an unethical. He's
the guy's a real jerk.
We'll get into the point of why he's in federal prison right now later, but not a joke. But I would be in the car with this guy, and he'd be on, random cloned brick phone 3 of the day, and I would listen to him do this, and he would call OCI, and he would say, "Do you know who this is?"
Well, he'd actually call Cellular Express.
Whoever the hell he was calling, and they would say, "Bob, the operator's friend," and he'd say, "It is Bob, the operator's friend. Good. I'm not going to bug you anymore today. Send me to another operator," and it would just be, and it never ended. And I'm glad the guy's in jail, but we'll get into that.
Well, yeah, but the reason that we're glad he's in jail has nothing to do with Bob, the operator's friend, which was really funny, by the way. And nobody does stuff like this anymore, I don't think. Maybe they do. AOL tech support was an endless source of amusement. It didn't used to be, "Thank you for calling AOL tech support. This is Jim, may I help you?" It was, I don't know, with apologies to any Indians in the audience with a thick accent. It was based in Dulles, Virginia, I believe. And so you'd get somebody who spoke English and who had been trained to be really nice to really dumb people on the phone, because that's kind of who AOL's customers were. And you could call up and say, "Now, I'm trying to sign on to the interweb and everything, and when I click on the program, ain't going nothing but beep beep and the lights on my pickup truck flash. And I think AOL, done haywired my wiring on my 68 F-150. And, this was one of the tech support calls that we'd put through. Like, we'd try to convince AOL that somehow, they were messing up our pickup truck, and they would actually very, 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 very spend a lot of time, trying to convince us that we shouldn't sue, because there's no way that they could have done that. And these guys would just dig themselves deeper and deeper. It was pretty funny. Like, they offered to have the legal department call once. Waffle House, now that may seem fairly unlikely. It's like this chain in the Midwest of waffle restaurants, and the PLA, evidently, one of the PLA members, I don't know quite what the story is, and they'll be doing a panel later, so you might ask them, but my understanding of this is, at one point, somebody from the PLA went to Waffle House and didn't get good service from one of the waitresses there, and so, having gotten the name of this waitress, they just called her incessantly for months and asked her all sorts of questions, well, I won't get into the kinds of questions they asked.
Good call.
Yeah, because this is being filmed, and I don't want to get myself in any trouble. And then the last one, but definitely not least, that came to mind as far as prank calls, was Fred Meyer. Now, Fred Meyer is, if you know what Walmart is, Fred Meyer is kind of like a Walmart, except that at the time they sold random things like lumber and, auto parts. But you could dial up Fred Meyer, and if you convinced them to transfer you to a particular extension, then you would be on the in-store announcement system for the store. And you could make any announcement you wanted over the phone, and everybody in the store would hear it all throughout the store, and there was no way that they could make this stop except by powering down the phone system, which nobody knew how to do because AT&T ran it, and they had to get AT&T out to power the system down. So you were guaranteed that if you got transferred to this particular extension, which I won't say is 900 or 9,000 on here, then, oh, wait, I didn't say that. It's something other than that, I'm sure. Yeah, they would put you on the in-store system, and so it was great to make ludicrous announcements. Did you know that if a price of some item gets announced over the in-store system, they legally have to honor it? So there was an absolute run on bananas one day. Like, people went bananas for bananas. They were only 9 cents a pound. It was a great deal. I think they sold completely out of bananas in the Tualet and Fred Meyer. Yeah, I had nothing to do with that.
And when they shut down those extensions, there may or may not have been some people that climbed onto the roof of the building and installed a BBS underneath the air conditioning unit.
Well, that was
extension.
at Safeway, but that's a different story.
Oh,
Yeah, BBSs, by the way, anywhere that you had a computer and a phone line, you could set one up, and it didn't necessarily need to be your computer or your phone line. As long as you had a way to power it and some phone line to plug into, then it was perfectly plausible for a BBS to, like, say, be clipped into, like, a credit card verification line at a Safeway that never received incoming calls, or did it? Yeah. So we get into the mid-1990s. By the way, that BBS I heard might have contained some very illegal stuff. So in mid-1990s, Confs are, like, really starting to blow up. They're gaining popularity in business. Everybody's using them at this point. And so, well, anytime something gets big, people like us start hacking those things. And so hacking teleconferences really gained a lot of popularity. Alliance wised up. They started monitoring conferences periodically because at some point, the percentage of legitimate conferences was eclipsed by the percentage of fraudulent ones. So they started shutting down hacker conferences pretty quickly. So there were the Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, California had a bridge that they only used during business hours, and after business hours it was full of freaks. There was a phone company called Citizens Utilities in California that ran a bunch of bridges that we were on. There was a company called Ripple that's still around. If you go to talkie.com, TALKEE.com, that company's still around. They still run recreational teleconferences. But the problem, remember, long distance cost money at this time. We didn't have these unlimited cell plans that we have now. They were almost all long distance. So, well, there's ways around that. You could set up a toll-free number, for instance. So, of course, toll-free numbers, if you set up a toll-free number, that means that whoever has the toll-free number pays the bill. And we didn't want a bill, so the best thing to do is to take a toll-free number maybe that belongs to somebody else and reroute it somewhere. So a guy named Mega Elite, who was a pretty active freak at the time, he's mentally retarded and he's only really good at freaking, but he's very, very good at that in social engineering. He's still sort of semi-active in the scene.
As in active as in he literally brute forces
Yeah, I mean, this guy
passwords to
scans
voicemail
by
boxes.
hand. If you were at the Telefreak panel earlier where they were demonstrating, like, scanning with ToneLoc, Mega Elite just, dials by hand each number and listens to what happens. There's no automated techniques for this guy, but he finds a lot of really interesting stuff. And then he's, like I said, he's mentally retarded, so he doesn't have a job. He has literally all day to do nothing but sit on the phone and talk to anybody who answers and try to be their friend. And he really does want to be friends with anybody he talks to. So, and I'm not talking smack about the guy. Like, that's just kind of the world he lives in. So he found a phone number that was part of a bulk account belonging to a paging company, and it spelled 1-800-50-SATAN. And he likes phone numbers that spell interesting things. And he was kind of really interested in the occult at the time. So he found that, and it went through to this disconnected pager. So he knew that it was like an 800 number that was up, and then it went to something that was disconnected. So he did a reverse lookup, which you could do through certain numbers called Resborg numbers that were operated by various long-distance companies, and found out that a long-distance company called Wiltel, which is the most ghetto long-distance company that ever existed. It's now back in its second incarnation, but they got their start by running fiber optic cable through disused gas pipeline in Oklahoma. It was like kind of one of those weird ideas some cowboy had that actually turned into a phone company. And he called up their knock and got some good old boy in Oklahoma to reroute that number to the rap line. And the rap line, like, if you called it, if you did any checking at all, you would never reroute anything there because it answered, "What's up? You reached the rap line and it's right on time. Operator, we don't take no collect, third party or credit card calls." You know, and it's like, it was basically like, you know, it was the rap line, you know, it was all about hip hop. And yeah.
How did you get me to agree to this? Like,
Yeah.
by the way, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there'd be, you know, no legitimate reason to have a toll-free number there ever, and it would be obvious to anyone. So, you know, this guy just rerouted it through, didn't check anything. And so this number was up for literally 3 months. And like, you'd call it and it would be constantly busy. The rap line was constantly jammed full of like a combination of hip-hop people and freaks, which was kind of strange. The dynamics got to be, especially when it came to arguments, got to be a little bit interesting. But eventually, Wiltel figured out what happened, and they didn't just shut the number down. They did it one better. They were really mad. So they routed it to this internal recording that was a special disconnect intercept that some engineer in the Wiltel knock set up intentionally. And it said, "Welcome to our long-distance service. If you are experiencing difficulty completing your call, please hang up and dial 1-800-I'm-a-hacker. And we've got your number. Thank you." I think that T-Love has a recording of that around somewhere still, but anyway. So in the background, like the cowboy who started Wiltel was making a deal with another cowboy named Bernie Ebbers, who was building a company called WorldCom that then became one of the largest stock frauds in U.S. history. But before that happened, WorldCom ended up acquiring Wiltel in some enormous, crazy all-stock transaction. So I don't know whether the cowboy got out in time before that happened or what. Don't really care. But the end result was the Wiltel engineers left and the WorldCom engineers came in. And one day, some WorldCom switch engineer found this, and thinking that obviously it must have been some act of subterfuge or sabotage by the outgoing Wiltel staff who knew they were losing their jobs, he did the only logical thing, which was to route the number back to the rap line, which of course was where it should have been. So it was up for another 2 months before eventually WorldCom figured out that no, having a toll-free number to the rap line isn't what they should be doing, and that went away. 1-888 Magnate. Magnate, the guy we talked about earlier, he really wanted a number that spelled his name. So as soon as the 888 prefix became available, he set up a subscription fraud with MCI. Now, unfortunately for Magnate, MCI was really wise to this kind of thing. So although he managed to get the setup slip by them, they had a verification team that would go through and do quality assurance later. And so a week later, it got shut down. And then somebody who's not me, attached a toll-free number spelling 1-800-JAIL-BOND to a different bridge. And so basically, like, identity theft, everybody knows what that is now. But back then, like, the idea of stealing the identity of a company and signing up for service on the existing account, which is really easy to do. Like, you know, you have an existing account that belongs to some company and you just want to add additional services. Well, companies always want to sell you more stuff, so it was really easy to do this. And if it was a big company, it could be a while before they noticed and shut it down. And this one lasted for 6 months at least. So in the meantime, I was living in Oregon and had some friends, one of whom's named the Felon. And he was a felon then, and he's much more of a felon now. And so we'd go out and we'd actually call each other and say, "Hey, let's go out and commit felonies tonight." And it was very casual. So yeah, fortunately the statute of limitations, I think, is passed for most of that stuff, but I needed to get it.
You think?
I think. Well, you know, we live in an era where there's retroactive laws where, like, you break the law if you're a corporation, and then we retroactively pass a law like granting immunity, and then, you know, the Patriot Act retroactively extended the statute of limitations for a lot of stuff. So I think it's just a matter of whether the police want to arrest you now. But a guy named, well, I'm not going to say his name here because there's people that might run it, but a Secret Service agent showed up at the 2600 meeting in Portland, which I started, by the way. and was looking for the profit. And around that time, I thought it was a good idea to get out of town. So where do you go when you're from Oregon and you need to get out of town? A small town in Arkansas is a good place to lie low. I was right down the road